So today we are going to be talking about shifting left. Um, I introduced myself earlier, but I'll just say it again. My name is Heather. I'm a digital equity specialist here. I'm going to be covering kind of the first half of our topic for today, and then I'm going to be joined by my colleague Elena Burney, who'll be talking with us through the second half of the presentation. So, what do we mean when we say shifting left? So shifting left is a digital accessibility industry term, and it refers to addressing accessibility as early as possible in the development process. So when organizations have shifted left, some pretty awesome things start to happen. Um, the first of which is accessibility becomes everyone's job. So teams across departments like design, development, HR, marketing, and customer service each understand their unique role in accessibility. It's not the accessibility team's sole responsibility. Success is measured in shared accountability. The second cool thing that happens, we're just getting our slides up.
Yes.
I am so sorry, everyone. I jumped the gun a little bit, but I think we have our slides up now. And so the second item here you'll find on this slide is, as far as things that happen when we shift left, leadership models accessibility priorities. So this is a big one, and executives allocate budget, time, and recognition to accessibility work. Not framed as compliance or risk management. Accessibility is framed as quality, inclusion, and brand integrity. This signals to everyone that accessibility is not optional, it's how good business is done. And the third thing we start to see is that feedback loops with real customers with disabilities become normalized. So organizations regularly engage people with disabilities in testing and decision making, not as a one-off event, but as part of standard workflows. Accessibility stops being theoretical and becomes relational based on lived experience. And onto our next slide, now that we've talked a little bit about what we mean and what happens when we shift left, talk about why it's really important and why this content matters. And the first item we have here is building accessibility in from the ground up drives innovation. So when we start with accessibility in mind, it actually opens up creative possibilities. Thinking about diverse users early on pushes teams to design cleaner layouts, write clearer copy, and create interactions that make sense to everyone. It's not about restrictions, it's about better design thinking that naturally leads to better user experiences across the board. Second reason, including diverse users changes how the world is built. For too long, people with disabilities have been left out of the conversations where products are imagined and designed. That's why so much of our digital world still doesn't work for everyone. Shifting left means changing that pattern. It means bringing lived experience into the process early, so we're not fixing barriers after launch. We are working together to prevent them. Third item on this slide, why this work shifting left is important, is that prevention is smarter than repair. So it's much easier and far less expensive to design something accessibly from the start than to retrofit it after the fact. When accessibility is part of the initial workflow, teams avoid reworks, reduce risk, and save time. The efficiency lets us focus our energy where it belongs on innovation rather than remediation. So now that we've talked about what shifting left means and why it matters, let's look at one practical way organizations can put mindset into action. And that is going to be with the W3C accessibility maturity model. Our next slide up is going to introduce us to the accessibility maturity model. So what is it? The W3C accessibility maturity model is a framework for advancing digital accessibility practices across organizations. Accessibility maturity models gives organizations a clear framework for understanding where they are on their accessibility journey and how best to move forward. Takes the big idea of shifting left and turns it into something measurable and actionable, helping teams build accessibility into their processes and not just their products. This model was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, also known as W3C Accessibility Guidelines Working Group. All right, so is created by the W3C, the international standards organization behind the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which we're all probably familiar with, also known as WCAG or WCAG. This framework is grounded in the same core principles as WCAG, but focuses on organizational practices, culture, and accountability instead of technical standards. This framework is designed to work for any organization and is industry agnostic. The model is intentionally flexible and adaptable, whether you're a government agency, a tech company, or a small business. It's meant to help you evaluate your current accessibility maturity and identify realistic next steps. It's about progress and not perfection. And now I'm going to hand off to my colleague Elena, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the framework.
Hi, everybody. The 4 accessibility maturity stages. It's a great place to start when thinking about the maturity model. So first we have the inactive stage. And at this stage, organizations might know that accessibility exists, but really don't have a consistent plan of action or accountability around it. Efforts tend to be reactive and focused on fixing problems just when they arise. In the second stage, referred to as launch, organizations are starting to take intentional steps. This could be like writing policies, assigning responsibilities, or providing basic accessibility training. The key here is moving from awareness to action. And then in the third stage, integrate, accessibility starts becoming part of everyday operations. Teams are applying defined processes, sharing accountability, and measuring progress. And then in the fourth stage, optimize, accessibility is part of the organization's identity. So data, user feedback, and leadership are really driving ongoing innovation through inclusion. So in addition to 4 maturity stages, the model contains 7 dimensions. So a maturity level or stage is attained by meeting some defined outcomes or proof points for a specific dimension. We won't get too into the weeds and list out all potential proof points, but as we go along here, I'm going to name a few examples of proof points that demonstrate an organization is improving in terms of accessibility maturity. So the first dimension, when we think about it in this order, there's not necessarily an order to it, is culture. So culture is really the foundation. When accessibility is part of how quality and inclusion are defined, it becomes second nature rather than an afterthought. For example, having a business strategy that includes a proactive approach to accessibility is an example of accessibility maturity in terms of culture for an organization. And then communications. This dimension focuses on whether the organization's communication methods and materials are inclusive. It includes things like accessible documents, websites, marketing, and employee information. So an example of progressing towards maturity in this dimension could be having accessible templates to create documents from to enable teams to produce accessible content on the regular. And then knowledge and skills is all about capability. When people know how accessibility connects to their work, they can apply it consistently. Regular training builds confidence and keeps knowledge current. An example of maturity here could be distributing org-wide surveys that identify current skill levels and gaps. So there's a gauge on the team's knowledge and skills. Now we'll move into part 2. We've got this divided up between 3 slides here. So another dimension is support, and that means giving people what they need: time, tools, and leadership backing. It's what turns good intentions into lasting progress. So for example, having established processes and policies for providing accessible customer service. And then ICT development lifecycle. This dimension really looks at process. So it measures whether accessibility is included from early design through testing, release, and maintenance. So this is really the one that relates to shifting left, and doing that could help you reach maturity along this dimension. So ensuring designers have access to accessibility checklists, guidelines, and annotation templates, like Accessible Web's Figma annotation kit, so that they're enabled to incorporate this more easily into their practices. And then our third part of the dimensions here, the personnel dimension looks at hiring. So it ensures that accessible hiring practices are in place so that individuals with disabilities can contribute to the organization, sharing valuable insights and experience. An example of this could be having an accessible job application process. And procurement. Accessibility really extends to everything an organization buys or licenses. Procurement ensures that vendors, tools, and services meet accessibility standards and don't introduce new barriers. An example of maturity here could be requiring proof of accessibility testing from vendors. So if you're looking to incorporate third-party content into a product of yours, ask for a VPAT and look for conformance on that VPAT. So when we partner with our clients at Accessible Web, our goal is really to help them mature in terms of accessibility, whatever that looks like for them. We offer software and services to aid in improving in terms of accessibility maturity across all 7 dimensions. From training in Accessible Web Academy to our Figma annotation kit and manual audits, we're here to help at each stage of the process. Further, with accessibility program management, which I'm happy to assist with, we can help you manage these efforts org-wide.
Thank you so much, Elena. I'm also just going to add to this last section in saying that if you, in fact, are interested in engaging with users with disabilities early and often in this process, we can also help facilitate that for you. All right, so